Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Gentleman's recognized.
So I've got 4 documents I'd like to introduce into the record. The first one is Jeffrey Epstein's 6th story played out for years in plain sight. And Acosta is quoted in here saying, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." The second document is entitled, "What Epstein's Bodyguard Warned About His CIA Connections." The third document is from Fox Digital. It's titled, "Epstein's Private Calendar Reveals Planned Meetings with Obama Admin Official, CIA Chief." And the last document is Wall Street Journal article that highlights Ehud Barak's 36 meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. He was the former Prime Minister of Israel and head of military intelligence for Israel. It may have held that title when he met Epstein, and then, yes.
Without objection, the gentleman will hold for a second. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one UC request. This is Judge Engelmeyer's decision from August in U.S. versus Epstein, stating the government's 100,000 pages of Epstein files dwarfs the 70-odd pages of Epstein grand jury materials.
Without objection, the gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I watched some of your Senate hearing yesterday when Senator Kennedy asked you, "You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these women to besides himself?" You replied, according to the transcript, "There is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else." You also said somewhere in the hearing and here today that the problem is that the case files are constrained by limited search warrants from 2006 to 2007 and that the non-prosecution agreement hamstrung future investigations.
According to victims who cooperated with the FBI in that investigation, these documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jes Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to. Victims including minors such as Virginia Roberts Giuffre, may she rest in peace. That list also includes at least 19 other individuals. One Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. By the way, I am trying to do my best to gather all the information I can for you and share it with you. Please leave your likes and comments, and I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's continue. When a sitting congressman lists Epstein's powerful associates on record and the FBI director still dodges, that's not just silence. That's protection. And today you're going to see it happen in real time, because what you're about to witness is one of the most important congressional exchanges about the Epstein case that has ever occurred, and it exposes exactly how the system protects powerful predators. First, let me set the stage. Representative Thomas Massie from Kentucky introduces several documents into the congressional record. The first is an article titled Jeffrey Epstein's 6th story played out for years in plain sight, where Alex Acosta is quoted saying, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." Let that sink in for a moment. A former U.S. Labor Secretary, the same Acosta who gave Epstein that sweetheart plea deal in Florida, admitted he was told to back off because Epstein had intelligence connections. The second document is entitled, What Epstein's Bodyguard Warned About His CIA Connections. The third is from Fox Digital titled, Epstein's Private Calendar Reveals Planned Meetings with Obama Admin Official, CIA Chief. And the last document is a Wall Street Journal article highlighting Ehud Barak's 36 meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. Barak was the former Prime Minister of Israel and head of military intelligence for Israel, and may have held that title when he met with Epstein. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are documented connections being entered into the congressional record. Intelligence agencies, former heads of state, CIA officials, all meeting with a known sex trafficker, and the FBI wants us to believe they found nothing worth investigating. Then another congressman introduces Judge Engelmeyer's decision from August in U.S. versus Epstein, stating the government's 100,000 pages of Epstein files dwarfs the 70-odd pages of Epstein grand jury materials. 100,000 pages. Think about that volume of documentation sitting in FBI possession while they claim there's nothing credible to pursue. Now we get to the main event. Representative Massie begins his questioning of FBI Director Kash Patel. Massie references Patel's Senate hearing where Senator Kennedy asked him, after seeing most of the files, who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these women to besides himself? Patel replied, according to the transcript, that there is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else. Patel also said somewhere in the hearing that the problem is case files are constrained by limited search warrants from 2006 to 2007, and that the non-prosecution agreement hamstrung future investigations. But Massie points out a crucial fact. Those constraints only apply to the Southern District of Florida. They do not apply to the Southern District of New York, the location of the 2019 sex trafficking indictment, which produced many things, including a series of FD 302 documents. This is where it gets absolutely critical. FD 302s are FBI interview reports, official documentation of witness and victim statements. And according to victims who cooperated with the FBI in the 2019 investigation, these documents in FBI possession, in Patel's possession, detail at least 20 men who Epstein trafficked victims to. Not speculation, not rumors, official victim statements naming specific individuals. Massie lists what we know from these files. At least 20 men, including Jes Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank. One Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million. One royal prince, almost certainly Prince Andrew. One high-profile individual in the music industry. One very prominent banker. One high-profile government official. One high-profile former politician. One owner of a car company in Italy. One rock star. One magician. At least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that Patel controls. Massie says he doesn't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does. So he asks directly, have you launched any investigations into any of these people? And have you seen these 302 documents? Watch Patel's response carefully. He says he's asked his FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information. They're working with Congress to divulge information and produce it. Any investigations that arise from credible information will be brought. But there have been no new materials brought to him launching a new indictment. Notice what he did there? He didn't say the victims aren't credible. He didn't say the names don't exist. He said no new materials have been brought to him for new indictments. That's a very specific dodge. It means the materials exist, the names exist, the victim statements exist, but somehow nothing has risen to the level of prosecuting these powerful men. Massie presses him. Is the loophole here that these victims aren't credible? That the 302s didn't produce credible statements that rise to probable cause? Patel responds that it's not his assertion. It's the assertion of 2 different United States attorneys' offices from 3 separate administrations who investigated those same materials. The 302 documents in FBI possession. Yes, they reviewed all that. Massie asks if Patel has personally reviewed those 302 documents where victims name the people who victimized them. Patel admits he personally hasn't, but the FBI has. So Massie asks the obvious question: how can you sit in front of the Senate and say there are no names when victims have named names in official FBI documents? Patel pivots to saying they're not in the practice at the Department of Justice and FBI of releasing victim names. That's not what they do. They're also not in the habit of releasing incredible information. But multiple authorities have looked at the entirety of what they have. This is gaslighting at the institutional level. Massie isn't asking for victim names to be released. He's asking why the perpetrators named by victims haven't been investigated and prosecuted. But Patel conflates releasing victim information with releasing perpetrator information as if they're the same thing. They're not. Massie pivots to another important point. He asks if Patel was present when the Attorney General had a White House event where she released binders to social media influencers. Patel admits he was. So Massie asks if you're willing to meet with social media influencers who stood to benefit from the sensational and sad stories of these victims, will you meet with the victims as well? Patel responds that the FBI will meet with anyone who has new information. When Massie asks if Patel will personally meet with them, Patel says the FBI and the professionals handling the cases will meet. Not a personal commitment, just bureaucratic deflection. Then Massie asks a bombshell question. Were you instructed that it was important to release the documents to the Oversight Committee on the day of my introduction of the discharge petition to release these files? Patel claims he doesn't know what day that was, so no. But Massie points out they were released that day, and there were victim names that weren't redacted because they were in such a rush. And the victims are not happy about that. This suggests the release was timed for political purposes to preempt congressional action and was done so hastily that it violated victim privacy. That's not transparency. That's damage control dressed up as cooperation. Massie then asks about CIA connections. Have you investigated any of the CIA connections? Have you seen the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein? And if you wanted to see it, would they show it to you? Patel says he can speak for the FBI, and that's presuming there's a CIA case file. He's reviewed everything the FBI received from the interagency, but he personally hasn't reviewed everything. When Massie asks if Patel would be willing to look at the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein, Patel says if there is such a file and it hasn't already been turned over to the FBI will look at any new investigative leads. Notice he doesn't commit to anything. He doesn't say he'll demand access. He doesn't say he'll pursue those leads. Just that if something magically appears that hasn't already been shared, they'll look at it. This exchange reveals everything wrong with how the Epstein case has been handled. We have victim statements naming at least 20 powerful men. We have 100,000 pages of files. We have documented intelligence connections. We have meetings with CIA officials and foreign intelligence chiefs. We have a former labor secretary saying he was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. And what do we have in terms of accountability? Nothing. 0 additional prosecutions beyond Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Epstein's accomplice, but not one of the powerful men who actually abused these victims. The system has protected every single one of them. This isn't a routine oversight hearing. This is one of the most direct confrontations yet between Congress and the intelligence establishment about who Jeffrey Epstein was really connected to and why there's been no accountability. Representative Massie pressed Kash Patel with specific, disturbing questions backed by documentation and victim statements. And Patel responded with a masterclass in deflection. He didn't deny the existence of the files. He didn't dispute the victim statements. He simply distanced himself, saying he hadn't personally read them, that multiple offices had already reviewed them, that the system found no credible evidence. But that's exactly the problem. Credibility is decided by the same institutions that have every incentive to protect their own. The Epstein investigation has always crossed into the intelligence world. Alex Acosta, former labor secretary, admitted he was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. Think about that. A U.S. official admitted the case was untouchable. Then years later, even after Epstein's 2019 arrest, the narrative was still carefully managed. Files were redacted, victims were silenced, and the names of men who participated in abuse, some of the richest and most powerful in the world, were quietly erased from public view. When Kash Patel says, "I haven't personally reviewed the documents," that's not transparency. That's strategic ambiguity. It's how institutions insulate themselves from accountability. It's how justice gets buried under layers of bureaucracy and ongoing investigations that never seem to conclude with actual charges. And when Massie asks about meeting with victims and Patel pivots to the FB, I will meet with anyone who has information, it shows how disconnected this system is from humanity. Victims aren't information sources to be mined for prosecutorial value. They're people. Women whose lives were destroyed while the world looked away. Many of them were children when they were trafficked and abused. This is bigger than Epstein. It's about what kind of justice system we have, one that protects power, not people. When an FBI director can sit under oath and avoid naming a single trafficker, despite files full of victim statements naming names, we're seeing institutional rot, not justice. That's why this exchange matters, because in real time, we're watching the limits of truth inside a system that was never designed to reveal all of it. We're watching how the machinery of government protects the powerful even when confronted with documentary evidence of their crimes. Think about what we know. Victims named at least 20 men in official FBI statements. Those names are in 302 reports sitting in FBI files right now. We know some of them. Jes Staley, CEO of Barclays, has been publicly linked. Prince Andrew has been credibly accused by Virginia Giuffre and paid her millions in a settlement. But what about the Hollywood producer, the government official, the former politician, the billionaires, the rock star, the magician? Why haven't they been named? Why haven't they been investigated? Why haven't they faced consequences? Because the system that's supposed to pursue justice is the same system protecting them. 3 separate administrations, multiple U.S. attorneys' offices, the FBI under different directors, all have looked at this evidence and decided not to prosecute anyone beyond Epstein and Maxwell. That's not a failure of evidence. That's a choice, a deliberate decision that powerful men who sexually abused minors procured by Jeffrey Epstein will face no consequences because holding them accountable would be too disruptive to the systems of power they're part of. The intelligence angle makes it even more disturbing. If Epstein was connected to intelligence agencies, if he was gathering compromising information on powerful people for leverage, then prosecuting those powerful people exposes the intelligence operation. It reveals that our government or allied governments were complicit in or utilizing a sex trafficking operation for intelligence purposes. That can't be allowed to come out. So the files stay classified, the names stay redacted, the victims get ignored, and men who rape children get to continue their lives in wealth and power and respectability because the alternative, full transparency and accountability, would implicate too many powerful institutions. That's the uncomfortable question we're left with. What happens when the people in charge of exposing the truth are the same ones protecting it? What happens when FBI directors and U.S. attorneys and judges all decide that some truths are too dangerous to reveal? What happens when justice for victims is sacrificed to protect the powerful? We get exactly what we're seeing. A congressional hearing where a representative armed with documentation and victim statements can't get straight answers. Where an FBI director admits files exist but claims nothing credible was found. Where intelligence connections are acknowledged but never investigated. 100,000 pages of evidence produces one conviction beyond Epstein himself. This is how institutional corruption works. Not through dramatic cover-ups and destroyed evidence, though that may happen too, but through bureaucratic procedures, through claims that proper authorities reviewed materials, through assertions that nothing rose to the level of prosecution. The system buries truth under paperwork and process and jurisdictional complications until public attention moves on. But some of us aren't moving on. Some of us are going to keep asking why victim statements naming 20 men haven't resulted in 20 investigations, why intelligence connections were never pursued, why files get released to social media influencers for publicity, but victims don't get meetings with the FBI director, why every single powerful man connected to Epstein has escaped accountability. If you believe accountability shouldn't depend on power, then stay informed, stay loud, and keep asking the questions they refuse to answer. That's how real change begins. Not through trusting institutions that have proven themselves untrustworthy, but through sustained public pressure demanding answers they don't want to give. Subscribe if you want to keep seeing coverage that doesn't accept official explanations at face value, that doesn't treat FBI directors and U.S. attorneys as neutral arbiters of truth, that centers victim voices and demands accountability for powerful predators. Because this story isn't over. The files exist. The names are in there. And we're not going to stop demanding they be revealed and investigated until justice is actually served.